Good day, good people of the world. You are listening and watching Mondopreneur podcast, and this podcast is supported by U.S. Embassy in Belgrade. The main goal of this podcast is to share stories of people and women that are running their own businesses or working in NGO sector at universities or big corporations. And the idea is actually to share how they are dealing with this new situation that is simultaneously happening to all of us all over the world. My today's guest comes from Podgorica. It's a capital of Montenegro, and her name is Milica. Milica is she has finished journalism, and she's at this moment working for remotely, of course, for a company from Slovenia. But she will tell you more about herself in a minute. So enjoy our conversation. Hi, Milica. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. How are you?
I'm fine. At this moment in Belgrade, it's -4 or 5, and the subjective feeling is that is minus, I don't know, 100 for me. So I really hope, and I don't like winter, and I don't like cold. So I really hope that is warmer and better in Podgorica, in Montenegro.
Yeah, we never have a real winter here, actually. We always, well, we usually get a lot of rain during the winter months, but yeah, ironically, during pandemic, the weather is great during the last couple of days. Yeah, all I'm doing, like I'm looking over the window, and yeah, that's all I can do so far. But yeah, it's being at home. I think for a for almost a year now, you stop noticing the weather. I think.
I agree.
But
I
yeah,
agree.
but I'm also not a fan of winter, so I feel your pain. And I do remember winters in Belgrade. Because I lived for a long time in Belgrade, and but the good thing is, I definitely think that I enjoy more living in a place where there are all seasons, because that became some kind of luxury in the last decade or so. So yeah, here in Montenegro, all we get is summer, a very long summer, and then I think that the rest is like some kind of fall with a lot of rain, and that's it. But at least the temperatures are mild. So.
Yeah, I know. Uh, I would like to just to come to Podgorica or come to the seaside and spend the whole summer somewhere at the sea. Can you tell us something about yourself? Like, what is your educational background? How was your career path, and how is your education actually connected to your job right now?
So I currently work, I'll start from the present day. I currently work as a creative technical writer uh, for a company, as you mentioned, which is based in Slovenia, but also has offices a little bit around the world. And the company is actually developing or has a product of its own. It's involved in software industry, and the product is aimed for advertisers and publishers. So it was I started working for them last May. So basically, right after the pandemic hit. And yeah, for the moment, I am based here in Podgorica, and I work remotely, but probably pretty soon I will move to Ljubljana. That is the big plan, and that was the plan when I interviewed for the job and when I was actually reading about the job requirements, because my work actually involves a lot of collaboration with engineers. As as a technical writer, I am writing about the product itself. So I'm kind of curating the content that is uh, used by those people who are actually using our platform. The company's name is Celtra, and actually uh, they've been around for over a decade now, and I, I I'd like to mention this international aspect of the company because, as I mentioned, we do have offices around the world, but the clients are mostly based either in the United States or elsewhere. So I'm that's why I wanted, like, for us it might be weird to some people who would be listening, and they might be asking, like, why are we speaking in English, but I need to mention this because I from our email conversation, I didn't want to sound like a snob. Like, we speak the same language, right? So for those who don't know and who might listen or watch this, I'm from Montenegro, you're from Serbia, but we do speak the same language, and I think we do understand each other very well. But for the purposes, I guess we're going to talk about the job and all that, and it might be just easier, but I'm drifting. So yeah, the my this particular experience is within a company that is pretty big and that hires around 200 people. But my educational background and the previous experiences come from, like, more of an analog world. I graduated in journalism, as you mentioned, uh, over 10 years ago. And I only briefly worked as a journalist. I was, at the time, I was in the United States, actually, and I had for a couple of months, I was working as a correspondent from the United Nations. And I was, like, covering the General Assembly and stuff like that. But that was fun. But there was another option that came in at that moment when I lived there, and it was, it involved marketing. So I thought, as long as there's something for me to write about, I'm fine. It can be whatever. So I was in different, let's say, in different organizations. I worked for Francophonie, which is the international organization. Um, you've probably heard about it. So I worked for their representation in the US for a while. I also collaborated on a magazine that was issued by one of the correspondents for the UN Society. I have then worked also briefly, and that experience was very dear to me, um, for a French trade office based in New York. And for them, we have actually worked on helping them import the wines from Languedoc-Roussillon region at the south of France, which was not at that point. It was a long time ago now. I hope they did well in the meantime. But they were not super popular in the United States because it's a huge market. So that's where I kind of started leaning more towards marketing. And then I switched to another company in New York as well, which was working with interior designers and suppliers from Italy and Belgium. And there I stayed for a little over a year and a half. And I had visa issues. That's why I'm, like, mentioning all these things, because in the meantime I was also babysitting. I was teaching French, doing different stuff. It was all of that. I really enjoyed it because my idea when I went and joined my family in the United States was just to go there and spend 1 year and learn the language, and that's it. And at the time, so when I went to the United States, I was actually, I just graduated from college, and I was living my life in Belgrade, and I loved it. And I considered that to be my home. Um, and things changed in the meantime, and instead of staying 1 year, I stayed 4 years in the United States. But then, because of these visa issues, which you might be aware of that probably, and I guess a lot of people who are listening or watching the podcast as well, it's the work visa is never easy, and it's a huge process. And because at that point, that was not the first time for me to live abroad. I was a little bit, I had enough, let's say, and I needed a break because, yeah, and I decided to try and go back home. And I, like, looking at it like it was over 6 years ago, I really think right now that I made a great decision because everything that happened since led me where I am today, which is obviously not great because we're still in the pandemic. But I mean,
But it
when
doesn't
it comes
matter.
to
You
my
can be.
career path, yeah,
Yeah, when you said that we are now in the pandemic, it will be the same whether you are in the States or, I don't know, in Cambodia. It will be the same. Or in Podgorica. So,
yeah,
yeah.
it's true. It is true. But I meant more in the sense that okay, plans change, and especially, and I'm going to talk about it later. I decided to switch jobs right before the pandemic struck. So, or actually, I got the offer right before it all happened. But who knows? In any case, I think I would actually recommend to anyone who's, if there are young people, like super young in their 20s or even younger than that, for listening to this, if you can ever get a chance to go somewhere outside your country and spend a year, go for it.
Do
That
it.
is, and it's hard to make a decision like that because we all like you know some kind of routine. We like feeling secure and so on. And it's tricky when you have to give up all that and risk. But well, I started early as a kid moving around, so that was not something that where I had a choice, I would say, and that's why I might be, let's say, brave to take these decisions now that I'm older. But it helps. It helps me to just leave and go seek another experience. But yeah, even if you like have the best of your life, wherever you are, change is always good, I think. So I mean, um, and so yeah, I mentioned all of these changes that I had in the United States uh, because of these issues. And for me, it was never a matter of like, yeah, I want to stay no matter what. I'll be the illegal immigrant. We have a lot of those, and I met a lot of those people, and I felt for them each time whenever I heard their stories because it was painful to listen to that struggle they went through, and I'm like, you know it's not about being spoiled or I just want to have a life that is, well, decent, in a sense that I don't have to worry somebody's going to arrest me just because I'm here illegally. So that was never an option, and I decided to come back home. Initially, I left Montenegro when I was 4, and came back 25 years later. So that was at the moment when I moved back home. I was almost 30, and it all seemed very challenging and also exotic in a way.
In what, sorry,
um,
in what sense was it challenging to return to your
um,
hometown?
well, first of all, I mean, I do have relatives and family, extended family here, so that was like the easy part because I knew I wouldn't be totally alone. But it was challenging because I didn't have any friends. I used to spend all my, like, as a kid, I used to spend my summers here. We would visit grandpa, grandma, all the rest of the family, and have a great time. But how it is. If you don't grow up somewhere, you don't have that sense of
Connection.
connection. You don't develop that unless you're involved in school or some other activities. But I mean, based on because of these previous experiences, I wasn't that afraid. It was more when I'm if I want to qualify that as a challenging experience, it was more of an expectation actually, because I heard like, oh my God, like, what people would tell me at these months before I moved here, like, what are you gonna do there after after New York? You lived in New York, and at some point, you change, you come to Podgorica, which is a very small town. Um, but maybe that was at that moment that was a challenge that I wanted obviously to prove something to myself at that point, but also I did, and that's why I mentioned my age. I did want a sense of belonging. I missed that in my life, and I did feel that when I lived in Belgrade, because it was for a long time. It used to be my home, so uh, when I spent a lot of time in Poland as well. So whenever we would, as a family, come back, Belgrade was our home. Uh, but I needed, something, some kind of like a root, because I was a guest everywhere, whenever I lived, wherever I lived. And the good thing is, those kinds of experiences teach you or prepare you to adapt well. But I've also met uh, people with similar experiences who would break at some point. So I was afraid of that. And I really came here with an idea like, yeah, this is going to be my home for the rest of my life. I'm not moving anywhere. I had a good, a goodwill to do that, but I think there is. I discovered in the meantime that my drive is to change places. So, and that's good when you. I think you come to in your when you're in your 30s, you're like, oh, okay, you just start accepting, everything about you that is also wrong, as well as good. So I think it was luckily I didn't even have any doubt that I would, if I would find a job. I was just following my instinct. And I started when I started working within a month and a half. And it was first for a PR company agency that was involved a lot with the real estate. And they also had a lovely, and still have this lovely magazine. And I was writing for them. So for me, it was always important to stay connected to writing. But then I also simultaneously started working for my previous company, which is a web design agency or interactive studio design here in Podgorica. And that's how I got into the digital world, which was completely new to me. And the funny thing about that was that the moment I started working for them, I knew that this is where I want to stay. This is the industry where I want to stay.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can you explain why is it that digital marketing something that is? Why did you find yourself in that niche, or why did you find yourself in that sector? What is so special about marketing and then digital marketing?
Well, yeah, the about marketing, I think it's for me, it's still an unexplored field. But when it comes to digital and everything that it encompasses, when it comes to content production or content curation, that is something that in the digital landscape, there are no rules when it comes to content. And there was one side of it that I loved. Not necessarily maybe no rules, but just the liberty that you don't have. For example, when you work as a journalist, right? You really need to. Obviously, any organization, every system has a set of rules. But here, I discovered this, and then it was I think as well the technology that made it lovable and also easy. It was because I think we belong to this generation, for people who have who had to transition And I've seen that transition happen here in Montenegro. So the situation that I saw here in 2014 when I came here is different now, you know. So you can see this progress, I think, a lot better than in other places where it has been happening for, what, decades now. So it was, for me, that was also another drive to be part of that world, which is here in Montenegro developing. Because at the moment when I joined my previous company, Montenegro, or actually different businesses, wouldn't even consider hiring a local company, for example, for creating their website. Everything was outsourced. But then something happened, obviously not in 2014, but a few years back, from let's say 2010 on, where there was something was created. Different people came in from either from outside or people from Montenegro who used to live abroad and who went to school abroad, and they created this environment with their businesses where it became possible. And today in Podgorica only, I think there are, well, I don't want to exaggerate, but I think, well, for our context, that's a lot, but there are dozen companies that are involved in software engineering. And not, so it's not just when we talk about like digital marketing, but generally in software engineering. So I think those are the things. I love your question because I don't think that I've ever given it a thought, like a very good thought about like what I really, really love about it. But all the things that I mentioned make me feel like I belong in this world. And also one very important thing is that you always have something to learn. So because it's ever changing, and in that sense, when I look back on my education, which was very traditional, especially for the Balkan context, as you may imagine, I was nowhere near ready to be a journalist because I didn't do. I had a lot of colleagues who would just, attend different internships or who would start early. I was still undecided whether I want to pursue that as a career. And obviously, I had the luxury, I didn't have to work at the time when I was studying, which I remember that for Belgrade especially. There were a lot of people, young people, who just had to earn their living while studying. And that's, all those things helped me maybe figure out what I want to do or what I didn't want to do at that moment. But and also a bit of luck, I do believe that decision. That's why I'm going back to that point. That decision that made me come back home has brought me to where I am today when it comes to my career. Because had I stayed in the United States, where I, because of my visa issues, had to change jobs every now and then, I don't know if I, would have ended up in a digital world and be able to develop a career there. So I'm grateful for that. And for,
nice.
because that's really, especially, if you don't have a very straightforward education that puts you right in there. I'm not an engineer, but I worked with many people, many young people, especially here in Montenegro, who have studied either electrical engineering or mathematics, but and also with those who have dropped out of college, but decided to become developers, and it is possible. So you don't need a formal education to be a good programmer. You don't. And same goes, I think, for designers. I'm traditional in that way. I do believe that you need something like education is more of like a foundation. But I think that college is a little bit overestimated because everything that you learn before, that's also counted. That should be counted. So yeah, it's just a foundation, and everything you do afterwards counts even more. So I think that, for people who are involved in technology, learning never stops, because that's one field that is ever growing. I mean, as a tool, it can help different fields, and I'm always like looking back, like, and thinking, maybe I made a mistake. I might have been like a decent journalist. Maybe, I don't know. But
Who knows?
I think, yeah, you can never. Yeah.
Yeah. So, can you tell us? Can you tell us something about? First, I would like if you can explain just in few sentences what is a creative technical writer. Because for me, when you say technical, it's just something that is like boring, or something that is totally opposite from creative. So
Exactly.
first, can you just explain a bit what is a creative technical writer? And then I would really like if you can share your experience searching and finding job through LinkedIn. Because some people start saying that LinkedIn is like Facebook for business people. But I don't agree. I think that there is a huge potential in LinkedIn, but we just don't know how to use it as a tool. We just don't know how to actually use it. So can you share something about those two topics?
Sure. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And when it comes to your point about uh, qualifying my job the way you did, and I think, uh, well, first of all, the reason why I wanted to change jobs, I need to kind of give a backstory to that, was simply because I wanted to. I felt like it was the right moment for me to take the next step and become a member of a larger organization. So that was just one of the things that I considered at the time, but it was definitely one of the most important things. And I knew that being able to join the bigger company would allow me to focus in my career, because previously, as a content editor, content writer, copywriter, I was just, at some point I lost myself, because I felt like I was doing everything at the same time, multitasking. And some people thrive in that. I'm not one of them, even though my former boss, who's a very good friend of mine, he sometimes would disagree. But I just knew that if not now, then in a few years, in a couple of years, I would just burn out. So I wanted something that would give me more focus, and that would make me proficient in just one field. Like, okay, I know I can write, but there are many people who can write. But if you want to, yeah, I mean, let's be fair. But if you have an opportunity to use your talents, or and focus on one field and expand that gives you this competitive advantage that is always something that recruiters seek for. So yeah, the when it comes to that job, when I saw the posting, and I'm gonna get to the LinkedIn part, I was also actually very attracted by the name of it. It seemed like something that is, opposite, like creative and technical, right? Because in my previous experience, I had done some creative writing, because I worked on, product design together with designers. We did some funny stuff. It was really enjoyable. That's what I loved always about my job in the digital industry. But here, I knew that and when I read the ad, it was amazing because I figured at that moment that I was able to find myself in all of these bullets they listed. And that's because, again, it did give me some sort of niche, or actually they offered some sort of niche, but also it was broad. So the job is essentially, I'm in charge of maintaining and creating content for a support site, which we as a company have because the product is so complex. It is a centralized platform where you, if you were a publisher or a marketeer or a brand, that you can use to produce and create beautiful ads, and then you're also able to distribute them and traffic them to third-party platforms. And so you're able to do that all within this one system. You don't have to hire an external agency or media buying. You can do everything on your own. So for that product that is so complex, I have to produce together with my team. We have to work daily on a bunch of articles that are helping users navigate through this complex platform. And creativity comes in the moment where you have to think of, different ways of making their user experience enjoyable and not just useful. In the sense that, okay, cool, the technical writer needs to produce instructions, manual. But, the creative part is where you get to experiment. But again, I have to go back to those rules that I mentioned that I didn't enjoy at the beginning of my digital career, or my career in digital. But yeah, because especially I think in when working for anything that is related to product design, you have to deliver uniformity. You need things to be consistent, both visually and also in the way you express yourself. So you have to be very detail oriented in a sense that, take into consideration the terminology that you use. You have to, in the documentation that we prepare, that needs to reflect everything that our users see in their platform. And basically, if the support documentation is, that's what the user experience people say, the people who are either designers or content editors who are in charge of user experience, they say that, the support documentation should be just accompanying already an experience that is already good. Because, it's how you approach any new, I don't know, you buy a gadget. Do you ever read a manual? It's only when you start
Actually,
exploring on
sorry.
your own,
Actually,
right?
I do. I'm the kind of
You
person that
do.
actually reads.
But that's because of your own education, right? I know. But normal people don't. You do it, I do it, but regular, like, I bought these headphones. It's the first time for me to have these. Like, yeah,
Uh-huh.
I'm in the technology world for a decade almost now, and I mean, it was I opened it and I immediately wanted to figure it out on my own. Obviously, it's super simple to use, but I never even thought about reading the manual. And that's how it's not just about technology; it's like anything that you buy. So, but it's necessary because the moment something doesn't work, it's the only reference that people have. So obviously, I work at a large company, so that means that we're not the only resource, let's say, for our users, obviously, because we have a great technical support team. We have people who work directly, who are in charge of certain clients. So they are, let's say, we're spoiling them, and that's also the beauty of it. They can always find a solution, be it the article that I will write, or just calling their customer manager. So yeah, and
Thank you.
yeah, there was. I mean, I'm not. I'm still exploring. This is a new role for me, as well, because I think this is something that I haven't seen in Montenegro. So when I joined Fleca, my previous company, my former boss, he recognized the need, that web agency, he recognized the need many years ago to have someone in charge of content, because he knew at that point that engineers cannot do it, designers cannot do it. So that opened the door for me in that sense, and I'm again forever grateful for that, because it's, you know, it's one of those, you always have to like fight, you know, you have to prove yourself when you don't exactly belong in that environment. And but then, you know, if you create as a someone who owns a company, if you create an environment where, you know, you make people aware that these roles are important, then, you know, I know that in Montenegro there are others, but I mean, I really felt when I decided to leave my previous job that I just, what I was looking for at that moment, I wasn't able to find here. But then again, I also had the feeling that I worked for a great company, so great that I don't even want to consider others. You know? So it felt like a natural step to look for something that, well, we still don't have here, but, you know, with all of my previous experiences, I mean, everything is temporary for me, and who knows? But I was, again, when I think about, you know, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I'm so pleased that here in this country that is struggling, like all the Balkan countries, we do have this, you know, we do have success in IT industry. So it's, you know, because at the time when I worked at Fleca, we used to have international clients, and that is something that gives you like, okay, so, you know, you can educate the local population, and have them realize, local companies have them realize that they need an assistant, be it a website, a mobile application, whatever. They do need someone who knows how to do it. They don't have to go elsewhere. They can reach, you know, for you there, and it's a work in progress, you know, to raise that kind of awareness. It still is, I think. But again, I'm very glad that it became like a normal market demand, say, for jobs like that.
So can you share with us your experience of searching for a job via LinkedIn?
Yeah, so I started at the end, let's say at the end of 2019, and I think at that time I was curious, because I also had this feeling that LinkedIn is more like Facebook or any other social media, where people are just you know, having fun and connecting, and not really using it for professional purposes. And in Montenegro, I think even less. Uh, but I was curious to check out if anyone was advertising for jobs on LinkedIn. And yeah, I didn't find anything here, but I already made a decision to try elsewhere. So yeah, I think I didn't know at that moment, I didn't know where to start. So I went back to my analog ways. I made a list of, you know, pros and cons, and I had to decide not just about, like, I wasn't looking for a specific company because I didn't know, but I was looking for jobs related to content editing and writing and stuff. I had to decide about a location. So the next thing was you know, figuring out, like, okay, if it's a job in Europe, in the European Union, it might be hard because of the visa. But I decided that I don't want to care about those things, because I think at that point I gained like enough confidence, I would say, to think that, okay, you know, people are looking for good candidates. and everything else in the meantime should be figured out. That is the kind of confidence that I was lacking when I was back in the United States, because at that point I knew that, to for a company to sponsor me for a visa, I would really have to be brilliant or be a doctor or be an engineer, which I wasn't. So, but here in this sense, also a very important thing when you start looking not just for a job via LinkedIn, but any job, if you're doing it from a perspective of someone who already has a job and does not feel pressured to leave it, then, it's easier. So I really felt like I have all the liberty and freedom in the world to just pick a place and start my search based on that. So that's what I did. I was in Ljubljana that summer of 2019 for the first time, and I loved it immediately. I loved the location, I loved people, I loved everything about it. And that was my choice. That was like, because I wasn't that determined to leave my country. I loved it here with all the difficulties that life in the Balkans brings along, obviously. And maybe I was, at that moment, even though I'm always driven by this change, and in my case, like if it's a change, it has to be a drastic one. So it's not about just, changing a job, but no, just change the country. But I didn't want to go like too far. So that seemed perfect. And also, I wanted something where I actually didn't know anyone. Because if I had, like, I lived in Poland, I lived in Switzerland, I was thinking, like, okay, maybe if I go, to these places, because at least I speak a language, at least it was, it was just, again, an instinct that I followed. And so, yeah, my search was based on locations. I did filter out a couple of these that a couple of preferences that I had. But then again, I wanted also, I was suspicious because I thought, like, yeah, it's probably not working, but, I will just check and browse a couple of times a week. But then as I went on, I realized there are so many job postings every day. And just for a content writer, online content writer, there were like thousands per week. So it was insane, like worldwide. We're talking worldwide, not just Europe. And already then, even before the pandemic had started, some jobs were remote. And I didn't consider that. I wanted, because I'm old-fashioned, so I do love, being around people, and I think, you can only thrive when you're surrounded with people or by people. And I think the difficulty was I became impatient in a sense, but also I realized as I went on in my search that this requires a full-time commitment. And I had a job at that point. So I needed to make a plan. And that plan required a lot of sacrificing of, like, your free time, a lot of, like, going out, coffees, meetups. No, so every day I would come back from my work, and the rest of the evening I would, dedicate to searching, jobs online. And then not just LinkedIn, I went on Glassdoor and some other platform. But LinkedIn was the main focus. And then what happened during the weekends, I would send my applications. And, I think during the course of like 3 months, I sent about 120 of those. And what might be useful to people who are at this moment suspicious the way I was when I started, I heard back, or actually went on further in the interviewing process for about a dozen. So it's just like 10%.
10%.
And I have a friend who has sent like 250, but he didn't have a job at that moment when he was searching. And I realized, like, yeah, okay, this is a pace that I'm going to have, and then the way it works is that you usually get the automatic reply email. You know, I mean, very well. That sounds not really motivating, but you feel like you're on hold, and you can after several weeks you can distinct when there's a real person, an HR, who responds to your email or your application. So this is what happened again for me for these companies that invited me for an interview for first, second, and I had even like before Selfie, I had one for a company in Brussels. I went to a third interview, and then they picked someone up. And in most of these cases, the issue indeed was the visa, because for a number of companies that I applied for, which are based in Poland, which is I spent 8 years of my life there, and that really felt like a second home to me when I was a kid, and I loved it. It was always a choice to go there, but they were very strict. And in again, there were probably some who judged, based on my first email or application, that for some reason I'm not a fit, and that's fine. But I appreciated a lot whenever there was a real person who would just say, "Okay, Milica, are you like free to hop on a call in 3 days?" So here in this case, when I mentioned before, I read that advertisement for my current job. There was even something about voiceovers, which I used to do as well. But I didn't get to that part yet here in Selfa. But that was again this instinct telling me like, okay, I'm gonna apply for this, because I feel like all the requirements that they ask are doable. But what happened, as it usually does, I had my first online interview, then the second one, and then we got into the holiday season, New Year's Eve, and so on. And I heard from them. I received a task to perform a test, to write an article about a feature, and I didn't hear from them for about like 2 weeks, and I was already like signing it off and was desperate. But all the time, I really had a good feeling about it, because chatting with both the HR and then my current colleagues, and it was I felt relaxed, and that's what I really loved throughout that process. But to be very honest, I think that's because I had a job, so I didn't have anything to lose, and that helped me a lot. So being in a position where you have it, and you can. I was like, you're always on your phone. I was so proficient with LinkedIn at that moment, where I was like sending applications left and right without even like reading, just for fun. That's Whereas I was expecting to hear back from like maybe five companies that I researched, and where I was hoping that something might happen, and the rest I didn't even like care. So after I got the offer, because the process went for a long time, because of the pandemic and all that, but in the end, what I really think is important is that whole experience. It was the first time in my life for me to apply for a job online, and because usually what happened before was, you either send an email, you're recommended by someone, and then you get an invitation for an interview, which in my case luckily turned out well. But here I'm a complete, anonymous, and I was so proud of myself when I got to that last stage of the interview, where they invited me to come to Ljubljana to meet me. And I kind of knew that once I get that invitation, that's it, because that's where they meet me, and it's like I'm definitely going to convince them that I'm good. I can do it in person better than like this. And I think the whole point of having a job at the time again really helped me be relaxed at that interview and then get an offer 5 days later. So I think going back to LinkedIn, I think it is ever evolving. Even now, I'm curious, like, I'm encouraging my friends to do this because it's worth it. But you have to really commit to it. Not like, oh, I'll do it today or tomorrow and then I'll come back to it in a month. No, you really have to do everything. So first, you need to edit your profile. You need on LinkedIn. You need to update your CV. You should keep it like, I mean, at least this is from someone who's involved in writing, but I think you should keep your CV or resume very concise, to the point. Like, don't write essays; it's unnecessary. People will, and then also have 2, 3 versions of a motivation letter that you can also submit, because that helps. Especially if you're applying for a job like mine, people want to see. Okay, if you can't write a letter like that, I mean, why are you even applying for a writer? But I think the what's happening, especially now in the pandemic, is that the job search market has completely switched online. I don't think that it was different for the rest of the world even before, right? I mean, I think LinkedIn has really evolved in that sense, that they really offer great opportunities for sure. Another advice that I just thought of that I want to share is that you also, if you search for a job on LinkedIn, you might want to research that particular company and go visit their website, because usually what happens is that those websites are updated, and especially the job posting. And here you might, spend, I don't know how many hours applying, and then it might turn out that it's expired. So I think as you start doing it, you realize that it's easy. It became for me, because it went on for 3 months. I was doing that. It became a daily routine. So, and then responding to, because I even responded to some of those automatic emails that said, please don't respond to this. Nevertheless, I sent like a thank you for your whatever. I mean, that takes time too. But I mean, going back now, like to thinking about like working remotely, I basically finished my old job on Friday and started for Seltra on Monday. So I only had a weekend. So I didn't have a break. I was actually hoping like maybe they will not call me right away. Maybe they'll give me like a week so I can get some rest. But at that point, when I started in May, I had already worked remotely for 2 months, so it wasn't so hard. But what's hard is that I'm working and with people that I almost never met. Like most of them, I've never met. Only my immediate colleague and my manager, I met them when I was in Ljubljana for that interview. But that is difficult in a way, but also it is good when you think from our like very Balkan perspective, because I think these kinds of relationships that are only based on online communication allow you to establish a very professional connection most of all. But I'm still like hoping, because the office that we have in Ljubljana is really big. All the developers are there. So it's about like 100 people, and I'm hoping it would reopen at some point, because I was hopeful, if I go there, that would mean going back to normal, meaning I go to the office, because otherwise, like, okay, Ljubljana is cute, but But I want that. I want to go back to that routine where I don't talk to you or anyone over Zoom
Over
anymore.
I
Like
know we all do. We all do.
really.
Thank you, thank you, Milica. Thank you a lot. You shared
I
some
hope that this
very,
was useful, for
yeah.
at least for
You
some
shared
people.
some.
Or
No, no, don't worry. You shared some very important thoughts and your experience of searching online jobs. So, thank you a lot. Thank you for your time.
it's
I
my
know it's
pleasure.
Friday night, and well, if it was a normal time, we would probably go out somewhere. But
Exactly.
you can, yes, you can organize a Friday night at your home. So, thank you once again. Um,
Thank
good
you.
people of the world, you were listening and watching to Milica Scepanovic from Podgorica, Montenegro. I hope you liked and enjoyed our conversation. If you like, you can always follow us on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, and you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. So stay good, stay in good health, and see you in a week.